Agricultural Research Council of Nigerian Television. My name is Joshua. I welcome you to a very special episode of the program Back to Farm. Today on Back to Farm, we happen to have a professional who have been in the field of farming, and of course, like we already know, it's a new government, so we are talking to people who have actually used a model that has worked in a tremendous way. And we're talking about insecurity in agriculture, which is one of the major problems that has bedeviled the country. We are far away in somewhere in Gati in Masara state, where he's been coexisting with the locals, and believe me, we just want to know how he's able to maneuver in a thick rural area like this to be able to strive, so that we can actually pick those kind of models to inject them into the government of the day. Probably we might have a lasting solution regarding the issue of insecurity, the issue of the farmers harvest relationship and their likes. Join me as we're going to be talking with none other but Mr. Retson Tedheke. I hope I got the surname right.
You get it right.
Okay.
Tedheke. Retson Tedheke. So Retson Tedheke.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's good to have you here, or rather, thank you for hosting us.
It's good to have you. It's good to have you here.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now we're here on your farm. Believe me, it's an amazing thing to actually see how you were able to make use of the necessary thing you have to have this in place. How did this all come about, sir?
Well, I led the march against the National Assembly in 2016, occupying us.
Okay.
And it was easy to gravitate from occupying the National Assembly to occupying farms, because the question you ask yourself is, if you shut down the National Assembly for the next decade, how is that going to impact the lives of the ordinary Nigerian people? So we left National Assembly to occupy the farms. Now, why was occupying the farm important and strategic? Nigeria is an agrarian state. 70% of our population are rural Nigeria. We have a food hunger problem. We are a poor nation, so we have a poverty problem. We are a third world nation, so we have an infrastructure problem. And then we have the insecurity problem. Now, I always look at the Japanese revolution, the Chinese revolution, the Chinese cultural, social, and economic revolution. It was premised on China first, building the Chinese state for the interest of the Chinese people. China state for the interest of the Chinese people. So what we simply did was to look at models across the world that were nationalistic, progressive, developmental, and also had business component to them. The Cultivate model in Israel, farm estates, agricultural hubs, RUGA, and industrial parks. So that is exactly what we conceived. Very expensive, capital intensive, requires a lot of infrastructure, but productivity and economic sustainability requires long-time planning, not short-time Hail Mary moves. And so we came here, started in 2016-17, and then here we are, sitting on the farm estate with you, employing well over 500 Nigerians, both in the field, in processing, in cattle ranching, in feed mill, and all of the above. So it's been a long journey. It's been a tough journey, but we're here.
All right. Now, Nigerian agricultural sector has actually faced a lot of setback. What will you say is the major problem? Is it the policy or the people, or what is the major problem bedeviling Nigeria? Is it the importation and what they likes? What basically is the major problem in your own opinion?
The problems are many.
Okay.
But I'm going to look at it from three key angles. Okay. Finance, infrastructure, and then orientation. So let's look at orientation first and foremost. We lost interest in planting trees as a people. I often say that our failure as a country is our fault as a people. We lost interest in planting trees. There is no government policy that is designed for short-term survivability that can give the capacity to solve long-term problems. And food security, social security, national security requires long-term solutions. Solutions that are capable of driving us continually growth, driving growth continually in the country. So mindset has to change. We must stop focusing on the hammer philosophy, what I call the hammer ideology, the Yahoo mentality, the oh God will do it mentality. God will do anything. A nation must design a thinking process, like René Descartes said, "Cogito ergo sum." I think, therefore I am. A nation must design a thinking process where the focus is on how do we build Nigeria over time. Rome, they say, is not built in a day. So the mindset is a critical problem, and that is why I detest the the crusade mentality, the miracle mentality. Oh, I pray, oh Allah Akbar, in Jesus' name, things will happen. Either they happen. If you don't work, food no go show. Mindset. Then infrastructure. You see, without infrastructure, a nation cannot grow. And that's why I give credit to President Muhammad Buhari. Because the first thing a nation must do is to build the critical infrastructure that is required for national development. Because what is the private sector going to plug into? And I'm going to use myself as an example. The electricity that you see now, we have to spend over 150 million to bring it here. That is not something that I should be doing. The dam, we spent about 75 million naira to build that. That is not something that the private man should do. The road, even though it's normal basic laterite road, spent about 10 million to do that. That is not something that I should be doing. Water you provide, labor you provide, security you provide. No. Now, when government is able to provide that infrastructural need, an infrastructural base, the private sector can now plug into an existing infrastructure. Like I gave you an example earlier. If you have fantastic programs on television, and the person you are trying to sell the program to does not have television, what is the use? So, government needs to build the infrastructure. Unfortunately, agricultural infrastructure is lacking. Tremendously lacking in most of rural Nigeria. Because where 70% of your population is located, if you ignore the basic infrastructural need of that 70%, then your productivity is near zero. You can't work. You can't produce. Why? Because what is going to support the productive capacity of that population that you need to keep your economy going and keep your economy stronger? For goodness sake, there is no industrial revolution that is outside agrarian. Even the most industrial Western nation today all started their revolution with premise on agric. So you look at the mindsets need to change, a reorientation need to evolve, and that's what we hope Asiwaju is going to do that. And that's why we drive the Agbado Revolution, because why should you be ashamed to talk about what is capable of solving your economic problems? Agbado?
Yes, how can that Agbado Revolution be able to solve Nigerian economic
Okay, I'm going to come to that. So we'll talk about
the
third option of finance before we talk about the Agbado. Now, funding. For goodness sake. There is no Nigerian farmer today that is able to make 20% return on agricultural investment per annum. Now, the commercial lending banks are lending at anywhere from 25 to 30%. It means that you can never make money with commercial lending. The central bank is giving out at 9%. You can't make money with 9% lending. On top of that, you are also expected to go and get a collateral from Abuja or Lagos. There are very few farmers that have collaterals in Abuja and Lagos. That is owned by politicians and civil servants who have literally stolen this country dry and built those properties. So I am going to have to approach a politician or a civil servant to say, borrow me your property. And I'm going to pay rent for that property every year that I'm borrowing it. Consultants who are going to write proposals, facilitators and so on and so forth. So financing, whether you're talking about the central bank or you're talking about the commercial bank, is not working with regards to agricultural development in the country. So the challenge of funding, the challenge of infrastructure, and then the challenge of mindset are the critical component bedeviling the Nigerian infrastructural state, in Nigerian agricultural state. Now the Agbado Revolution. Waiting you get. Now you take the brag. True. Like with the talk, that TV be this. As I go use the right word. They say that the child make manhood rise. Something must be in front of a man for a manhood to become active. Waiting you get. Maize, Agbado, Masara, Oka. It's a 1.3 billion tons global capacity. That is for a global value of about $400 billion. Nigeria is doing an average of between 10 to 12 million tons of maize per annum. To give us about $3.5 billion worth of share. That is about 1% of global market share for maize. Do you know that if we, as a country, in the Asiwaju decade, take our maize production from 10 to 12 million tons to 50 and 100 million tons in the next decade, do you know that we will be adding $35 billion to the Nigerian economy? That is maize. We have not talked about soya beans or sesame or sorghum. Now, so you are looking at Agbado, cassava, dairy, or the Holland, I've often used that example, does 100 billion euro every year from agriculture. Under Buhari's first 4 years, Nigeria did $100 billion from crude oil. So Holland makes from agriculture in 1 year what Nigeria makes from crude oil in 4 years. The Australian dairy livestock industry is a $70 billion industry. What do we do when we come to Nigeria here? We demonize the concept of Fulani herdsmen. Whereas what we begin to look at are solutions around that crisis. Solutions that are capable of keeping the farmers, the herders to herd, and the farmers to farm. Okay. Now, so Agbado, the concept of Agbado Revolution is drive local productivity with your local capacity for the greater interest of your people within your local community. Because localization is the foundation of industrialization. The Americans did not become industrialized because they jackpot. No, they didn't. They became industrialized because they focused on what is made in America. How do we make things in America? How do we make America grow? How do we make America work? How do we make America survive? So they did not jackpot. They stayed home, they built their country, and now we are jackpotting into their country that they built with local capacity and local opportunities. So the concept of Agbado Revolution is localize your productivity, localize your capacity, enhance your local ability so that your nation can work. Because any nation that is not locally capable cannot become economically stable. That is the entire concept of Agbado. So what are we telling Asiwaju to do? Focus on Nigeria. I often say that what is wrong in eating made in Nigerians rice? If it has stone, chop your stone. Why will you not eat your stone? In the 70s and the 80s, the Chinese made in China was rejected everywhere in this country. It was rejected. True. Today, the world is made in China. Well, you know what the Chinese did? They ate their stone. In the 50s, Toyota was rejected in the United States. There's this popular cartoon, Flintstone, that we watched those days, where somebody go to drive motor, tire go in front of motor, the guy go to where the tire did, the tires, you know those Flintstone cartoons. The Japanese drove their cars and the tires were pulling up, but they drove those cars. Today, Toyota is the largest car maker in the world. No, if you don't eat your stone, you can never grow your people. So the mirage, the concept that government has no business in business is one of the biggest fallacy and one of the biggest deception of the Western neoliberal ideology when it comes to economic development and growth. Government is the only business in business. Why do you think that Amazon and Microsoft are fighting over American contracts? The big Weber. Why did they fight over American government contract? Why is Boeing and Airbus, Boeing US, Airbus Europe, why are they always fighting over subsidies? Because government in the West focus on developing their people, focus on developing local industry, focus on protecting American and European industries. Because when those industries get it right, productivity becomes sustainable and economic development becomes sustainable. So Agbado Revolution is, let us create a revolution in rural Nigeria. Let the local man in Gati and the village person in Ekiti, let the man who is in Kebbi and the man who is in Abia, let them know, let them feel that yes, our government is interested in working for us, working with us, and interested in solutions that are rural driven. Once they believe in that solution, they will go into the field and produce. And once production is active, and you're able to feed Africa from your farm produce, and you're able to process what you produce, because we must stop exporting raw material. Except you're going to, that is you wanting to continue with the crude oil course. When you produce crude and you're happy, and you smile, but the next day you import PMS, you import AGU, you import aviation fuel, you import Cameroon and kerosene. I say Cameroon. I'm used Cameroon because Cameroon is crying that we have removed a subsidy. You see, we must get out of that curse. If you add processing to chocolate, even if the chocolate gets to, we'll get it better. Just like we are now getting rice better.
True.
We'll get chocolate better. We'll get palm oil better. Indonesia and Malaysia came here to learn about palm oil in the 1970s. In 1976 to be precise, the year I was born. Today, Indonesia does about $6 billion from refined palm oil. Palm oil is more expensive than crude oil. So Agbado Revolution is localized productivity, localized industrialization, focus on our people, use maize, soya beans, cattle, and everything rural and agrarian to drive the next round of revolution. That is the only way we can be sustainable.
Okay, now, before now, previous government actually brought a lot of policies, agricultural policies, and the common man will end up telling you, we no see anything.
They're not the
What
same.
makes Agbado Revolution rare and different, that the grassroots farmer can be able to assess whatsoever government is giving?
Let me use a perfect example. So what government needs to do is different, it's simple. Create agricultural industrial hub in every zone in the country. Or in every state in the country, so that you bring agricultural mechanization closer to the people. Not be say I want tractor, I go need to go apply for Abuja. Not be say I want tractor, I go need to go. If I don't come Abuja, I don't go see tractor. It doesn't make any sense. If there are 100 tractors in Benue that serves the north central, and there are 100 tractors in Ekiti that serve the northwest, and there are 100 tractors in Kaduna that serve the north, Ekiti, the north southwest, north central, and you have 100 in Adamawa that serve the northeast, and 100 in Anambra that serve the southeast, and another 100 in Rivers that serve the south. It will be easier for farmers to leave Warri and go to Rivers, Port Harcourt, than for them to leave Warri and come to Abuja to apply. Okay, so when you what I call domesticate the industrial capacity of rural Nigeria. When you create estates, farm estate like what you have here, farm park, industrial park, RUGAs, and agricultural hub in those locations, and you fund them, what you do is to ensure that mechanization is closer to the people that actually need it. Because there are no farm, how many farmland there for the FCT? Most of them are what? Are rural communities. So you pull technology closer to the people, and then your consultant must then be ready to go to those local communities and evolve the process from those local places. So like the LCDAs in Lagos, what will happen? Agricultural industry will begin to spread from what? From those communities and what? Begin to expand. It's the Cultivate model in Israel. It's the farm villages in China. It's the production hubs in Thailand. That is the concept. So that is what is going to have to change. But when you wake up and you say, CBN is apply through your commercial bank. Commercial banks are interested in what? Turnover. So if you give money to commercial bank, what do you think you want to do with it?
So you're saying it's about manpower now, not the funds directly to the farmers.
At all, exactly. The farmers, like a wall of war cooperatives, because the Anchor Border program was premised on that. But this time it has to change. You have to now go to the rural communities and the local places and then work from the local communities out, not from state, not from Abuja in. No. The gravitation and the drive of companies like Innocent towards producing cars and all of these ones is something should change. What am I talking about? If you go to places like Thailand, Indonesia and co, they do what you call micro technology. Oxen. They still use oxen to farm. Okada, you attach plow to Okada. The big plow that Okada can pull.
Yeah.
Harrow. Tricycle, we have boom sprayers. Develop micro technology, because you see most of rural Nigeria don't have the capacity to hold tractors and the rest. So a farmer with Okada can harrow his land, can plow his land, can boom spray his land. Micro technology. Driven from what? From agricultural hub and RUGAs in those local communities. The people will feel the impact of government. So agriculture must be rural-centric, not Abuja-centric. The reason most of them are failing is because one guy from MIT, one guy from Harvard, because he read book, he get first class. Oh, he read agricultural technology, he got first class. We come from MIT, they bring him to Abuja and they say, design a program for the people. What do you want design? You don't enter bush before? You know what the bush look like? So people who are in the the system. People who are in rural Nigeria will begin to develop programs that will affect rural people. And look, you don't need to design them with English. For goodness sake, I've often asked this question. Is the language of technology in China English? In Japan, is it English? Germany, English? Korea, Portugal, France. All of these nations develop technology with their mother language. So Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba must become the central language of development and productivity. Of course, you tell me that Nigeria has 1,000 languages, we agree. So are all the other countries in the world. But we must localize the language of development. The man that fixed my tractor here, Tanko, the local head of the farm, no, they speak English. But he can get the tractor to work. So he's not an illiterate in the actual sense of it. What you need to also understand, what you need to understand is when you get somebody in Abuja who is designing concept for him, the person must understand that Hausa is the language he understands. That is the language that can drive his development and growth, and that is the language that must be utilized for his own good. So, programs, if they keep designing programs from Abuja and use that to wanted to use that to develop rural Nigeria, it will always fail. Something has to change, and that change must reflect in, like I said, the Asiwaju LCDA model, the way the cancer grows, RUGA, farm estates, industrial hub, and then agricultural parks must become the center focus. Government invest in those ones and then have consultants who can now spread the gospel from that local community. That is the way to go.
You are able to use a particular model that has worked here, that brought a kind of rapport between the herders and the farmers and in fact the community and the rest. Yeah. How do you think this same model you used to have a very smooth movement and everything in the farm and the locals can also be injected into Nigeria? Of course, you know the terrain of the South and all that. How can we be able to adopt some kind of models that will work in each different geopolitical zone?
Work with groups that are already running this across the country. In Abeokuta, there's Farmland, Farmer Samson Obule. You already have people like myself who have set up projects like this across the country. In short, on Monday, I'm sitting there with El Press. It's a Ministry of Agri project. They're coming here on Saturday to look at this because they have been part of what we're trying to do, and they see how they can make this a part of their component for conflict resolution across the country. So government, and look, the National Agricultural Land Development Agency, NALDA, that is supposed to be their job. Because what are you doing? You're developing land for agricultural purposes. So NALDA can become the center focus of driving farm estate across the country. Because see, you want projects like this, look, if you have this in every state, you are going to create over 1,000 direct jobs. Within the next 6 months, over 1,000 direct jobs. If now begin to think about having this 2 or 3 of this in every state. Now, you create about 3,000 jobs, and those 3,000 jobs will lead to reproductivity. You will cultivate, you will warehouse, you will process, you move to markets. It is going to create thousands of jobs along the value process. So, what needs to happen is government needs to invest more in places like NALDA, in places like the Bank of Agri. Take agri-financing away from, sorry to say this, away from the central bank, take it to either Bank of Agri or the cooperative banks. Then let them go to the local community. So, for goodness sake, why should Abuja be the centerpiece, like I said, of decision making when it comes to funding, farm estate, and so on and so forth? It has to go to the local communities. So the changes that you desire to have in the lives of your people can be focused on them in their local community, in their rural community. And look at the Niger Delta. The Niger Delta have the capacity of producing palm oil for not just the whole of Africa, but can supply at least about 30-40% of the world population. We have the land, we have the sustainable climate and weather that can be used for that plantation. So why don't you set up a project in the Niger Delta that is focused on palm plantation? And then give yourself a decade period time and say, okay, over the next decade, we are going to plant 50 million palm trees in the Niger Delta. Okay? And how do you manage that plantation? They have to be managed from the states in the Niger Delta with projects like this. Nigerians can begin to focus on long-term planning, like I said, and develop that. Not just palm plantation. What of cassava? Nigeria is one of the largest producers of cassava in the world. And the whole of the Niger Delta bed, Nasarawa State, Niger Delta, the North Central, the South-South, the South-South, the Southeast, the Southwest, the North Central, they are all cassava vegetation climate. So you can develop models under groups like this or build cooperatives whose job is centered on specific crop outline. Look at cocoa. For goodness sake, it was the current chairman, is it MD or chairman of Africa Development Bank, Akiwumi, who said in one of his interviews that chocolate, Switzerland don't grow chocolate trees, cocoa trees, right? But when Cote d'Ivoire was losing $1 billion because the price of cocoa fell, Switzerland was adding, their revenue was going up because the price of chocolate did not fall.
Alright, on that note, we come to the end of the program Back to Farm with none other but with Mr. Retson Tedheke, who of course has told us what is the best model to adopt so that we can revolutionize agriculture, especially the Agbado Revolution. So watch out for this very amazing intellectual mind as Nigerian intend to actually move forward from the new dispensation. Until some other time, my name remains Joshua Ishai. Thank you for being a part of the program. Have a splendid time ahead. Bye for now.